Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Simon Rosenberg here, Hopium Chronicles, back for another fun-filled event today. I've got joining me is my dear friend, Anderson Clayton. Welcome, Anderson.
Hey, Simon. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, no, listen, it's just I actually haven't talked to you in a while, so this is like our chance to catch up. Our Hopium community has rallied behind you these last couple of years, and we were proud to be a partner in your important wins in 2024, and are excited to be helping again in this incredibly important cycle. And so this is really just a check-in. We're going to have David Pepper come in later this week to talk about Ohio. We wanted to sort of start beaming into some of the states that we haven't been paying as much attention to recently, frankly, and get a sort of your sense of things. And I just wanted to begin. For those of you who don't know, Anderson Clayton, Democratic Party chair of North Carolina, and just all-around superstar and a good friend of the Hopium community. So look, a part of our premise about the fall is that there's a growing awareness in the electorate that of the harms that Trump is doing to the country and to them in North Carolina and to their families. That we have now, the tariffs that have raised prices and are hurting farmers and small businesses in North Carolina. You've got these cuts to biomedical research that will have a big impact on the research triangle, which is such a huge biotech component to it over time. You've got the ACA, the Medicaid cuts. You've got the lack of support for some of the rebuilding efforts that have to go on in North Carolina, the shutdown now, potentially ending of SNAP benefits. I mean, is there a sense on the ground? Do you get a sense in your work that there's a growing awareness that this guy isn't just, not only is he not who he said he was going to be, but that this agenda is turning out to be harmful to people and their families and their businesses?
I think we're hearing it from all across communities right now, the fear that people feel from this administration. And that's what we're seeing when you have people who got letters in the mail last week that said their health insurance premiums were going to rise by 40%, or people that are state employees right now in North Carolina whose copays are going up from $50 to $110 whenever you go to the doctor next. And I think that mad in 2025, to be truthful with you, Simon Rosenberg, which you know this very well, is not mad in 2026 all the time, but I do think that people are going to feel the impacts of this administration more and more throughout next year. And that's what's going to be where people are really going to start to understand even more than, to your point, small businesses or soybean farmers right now in North Carolina do, that this administration is not set on lowering cost or working for the American people whatsoever.
Yeah, and I've been really impressed with the party and what you're doing on tariffs. I mean, it's almost like every day you guys are trying to push Watley, who's running against Roy Cooper for the Senate in North Carolina, on his support of Trump's tariffs and what it means. Are you in the ag parts of the state and the agricultural parts of the state? Is there growing worry and fear about what Trump is doing? Because it certainly seems like he's waging a war against the ag economy that I'm sure many of them have been really surprised by.
Yeah, I mean, you think about it, North Carolina, agribusiness is still the number one economic driver in North Carolina right now. A lot of people, I think, look to the research triangle, or they look to the amazing sort of jobs and opportunities that the UNC system has created, but we still have the second highest rural population than any other state in the country other than Texas. And when you look at the fact that a lot of that is dedicated to farmlands, both throughout eastern North Carolina and western North Carolina, that, to your point, has been impacted by Hurricane Helene and is still waiting on federal funding from Hurricane Helene relief to come from the federal government. We've only received 9% of our federal funding allocation for Hurricane Helene relief right now. And that includes farmers in western North Carolina who are not able to put crops back in the ground, and who are also not willing to or able to come back from what their farms have gone through over the last year, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be, I think, for states like North Carolina and so many states. I mean, people don't really know, but the agribusiness is the number one industry, or the number one part of the economy of many states in the United States. I think that many of us, who are more urban or suburban people, are not really aware of the gravity of what Trump. This is why Trump is playing with fire in his own coalition, right? Because the combination of the high tariffs and also the mass deportations, which are creating additional labor shortages, making it much harder for people to actually tend to their fields and their crops and their livestock. It's creating a very challenging time for the rural economy, if you want to call it that. And I noticed that you guys have been hitting that very, very hard in your public communications in recent months.
When it was already hard too, right? I mean, I think that we've got to talk about the fact that small farmers have been suffering. We've seen the consolidation of agriculture, and especially with corporate farms and looking at CAFO's farms throughout places like Iowa and North Carolina right now for hog production alone. I mean, fun fact, North Carolina rivals Iowa for hog production in the state or in the country. And I think that most of the time people are looking at these policies as though they're going to impact entities already. And I'm like, but they already have. The last 4 to 8 years, I mean, Trump's first administration, in my opinion, impacted the ability. And we saw small farms across North Carolina have to close their doors because they weren't able to keep up in that first administration, let alone in the second one that we're going through now.
Yeah, no, Anderson, I just applaud your team for, I think, being really out front and aggressive in trying to engage your opponent, Roy Cooper's opponent, in supporting these indefensible tariffs. I mean, they're bringing higher prices for everybody and everything. They're hurting small businesses and farmers. And today, just as we do this interview, the U.S. Senate is actually going to be voting to potentially roll back some of the tariffs. We'll see how that vote goes. The last vote was 49-49. And so Trump has been struggling to keep his own team together on these destructive tariffs. And so thank you for I get your press releases every day, and you guys have been hitting this really hard, and so grateful for that. You also had
we got a really good team. That's what I should say. So a very big shout out to the folks that are working on the ground with me out here in North Carolina, because I cannot do it without them. And for those of you that don't know, listening to this, Michael Whatley is the current chair of the RNC, who is running against a 2-term governor, 2-term attorney general candidate in North Carolina for the U.S. Senate. And I still can't figure out if he actually even lives in the state, Simon, to be honest with you. I see him more in D.C. than I do in North Carolina right now campaigning. So, we'll see who makes it out and around while Governor Cooper is out there campaigning for NCCU homecoming and trying to make sure that he's out there across the state doing everything that we can.
And the early polling it seems like he has a modest lead, right, in Roy Cooper in the race, but we still got a long way to go in this. It's going to be Whatley, having been a Trump person and been head of the RNC, is going to be full of cash. And so this is going to be an expensive and difficult race. But right now, a year out, we should feel good about where we are, recognizing we still got a lot of work to do.
Yeah, we're going to keep our foot on the gas. And in North Carolina, what we've been doing since our Supreme Court election denialism that we had from Allison Riggs's case, Trump's Department of Justice has since come in and said, well, if we can't retroactively change the game and the way it's played, we're going to try to change the rules before it's played. And so they came in and sued our state board of elections this year to purge the voter rolls of over 82,000 people in North Carolina right now, and challenging their voter registration. So if you're somebody in North Carolina, you can go to ncdp.org/repair and find out whether or not you need to fix your voter registration form, because we want to make sure that nobody has got to cast a provisional ballot in North Carolina, and that your vote counts on the first go round in 26. And also, hopefully, if you're getting out for your municipal elections here in 25 in the state.
Yeah. You've got elections next week, right? You've got how many?
They're right now, too. I got early voting going on at this point in time.
How's it going, Anderson? Give us the update.
It's good. I'm really proud. We've got amazing candidates, people like Beth Kennett that are out there running for Burlington mayor right now. Adrian Maldonado is running for Salisbury City Council, and a lot of good people who have stepped up to represent their communities this year that we're behind. North Carolina has got over 1,100 races down ballot right now, municipal races across the state, and we've got more Democrats that are running for office in them than we do Republicans. And so we know that we're still building the building blocks in North Carolina to make sure that we're out in every single county next year and getting people out to vote for Roy Cooper and for Justice Anita Earls, who's going to be on our ballot for the Supreme Court election too.
Well, good luck next week, Anderson. I think people don't realize around the country, everyone's been focused on Virginia and New Jersey and Pennsylvania and California, but there are lots of down ballot races all across the country. And, our community has raised about $60,000 for the North Carolina party this year. A lot of that went in to fight the Supreme Court race, and when you were in the middle of that. But you've got another new legal challenge now, right? Or an expanded legal challenge, which is last week, the North Carolina Republicans decided to try to squeeze another seat out of for the House Republicans. Can you just give us a little bit of, take us back a little bit on that, right? Because this gets into the Supreme Court, right? Just walk us through what happened just a few years ago and how this is now a continuation of this effort to continue to, really redistrict a state, a purple state, into becoming an overwhelmingly, I mean, for people who don't know, North Carolina is in some ways is the most aggressively redistricted state in the country. A dead purple state. We won 5 out of the 10 statewide, races last year. But up until very recently, Republicans had a veto-proof majority in the House and Senate in North Carolina. Kind of extraordinary levels of gerrymandering that took place. Give us a little bit of history on this, because it's been in the news the last few days, and I think people would benefit from hearing the whole story.
Yeah, so North Carolina, this is the 4th time in the last 5 years that North Carolina has been re-gerrymandered as a state. And that goes back to the fact that we have been fighting in both our state courts and in federal courts over the last decade to try to get free and fair maps in North Carolina. And I like to tell people we're the petri dish, sort of where it started before it got into Texas and everywhere else across the country too. But in 2022, North Carolina Democrats had control of the state Supreme Court. And our state Supreme Court ruled that partisan and racial gerrymandering was illegal. And it sent back to the state legislature for them to redraw our congressional maps. And our state legislature drew a 7-7 even split for the members of Congress based on the fact that we had to get through the 2022 elections. And so when we lost the Supreme Court in 2022, unfortunately, they came back in 2023, and the Republicans decided that they were going to ignore a 200-year court precedent of stare decisis and say that they were going to overturn the previous court's decision, and took back and said partisan and racial gerrymandering is actually completely legal in North Carolina. And it brought us to the 10-4 minority that we saw get elected from North Carolina in 2024 to our congressional representation. And we filed a lawsuit then with the DCCC and the DNC in federal court that said that this was a violation of the VRA. It was a violation of people's civil rights in North Carolina to have this representation taken away from them. And that court case has been ongoing. And what we saw this last couple of months in North Carolina was my Senate Majority Leader, Phil Berger, say, because he has a primary right now. My Senate Majority Leader's never had a primary, but my Republicans are a little bit nervous because even their own party's pissed off with them right now. And the sheriff in Rockingham County named Sam Page is running against Phil Berger. And for those of you out there that know politics real well, you know that sheriff candidates are some of the top vote getters on a ballot anytime they run for office. And Sam Page challenging Phil Berger made him feel a little bit nervous. And Phil Berger made a phone call to the White House and said, "Hey, Donald, how would you like it if I could get you an extra congressional seat, but I'd like to get your endorsement in my state Senate primary right now, because I'm a little bit nervous about the Republicans running against me." This is, mind you, a 26-year incumbent who's been in office as long as I've been alive, everybody, right? And he's finally getting a little bit nervous he's going to lose a seat that he hand drew for himself. But where we're sitting right now, right, is that Phil Berger comes back and he says, okay, we're going to do this. Mind you, the Republicans in North Carolina have not passed a state budget for over 100 days. We have been without one. So teachers, public educators, right, your public servants in North Carolina, the 750,000 state employees across this state right now have not seen a raise and have also seen uncertainty in whether or not their jobs will be protected from the fact that Republicans have not done theirs when they have a supermajority in the state Senate and also a majority in the state House right now. They control the legislature. And instead, what they decided to do, instead of taking care of the people of North Carolina, they said, how do we disenfranchise them even more? And so they took us to a 11-3 minority by pushing through new congressional maps just last week. And unfortunately, there is a line item in my state constitution that says the governor does not have veto power over redistricting legislation or anything that has to do with what we call local bills in North Carolina, which Republicans have used to make local elections partisan in the state right now in different counties and communities across North Carolina. And so we attached on an amicus brief and an additional addendum to the lawsuit that we filed back in 2022 now. And so we have also made additional plaintiffs to that lawsuit to try to make sure that we're fighting to keep Don Davis's congressional district intact. But I also know that we are at a position right now where my state courts are not friendly unfortunately, and also federal courts can be a little bit slow to make decisions about what's going to happen, especially if their own party benefits from it. And so North Carolina Dems are looking at a long-term goal to make sure that we take back the North Carolina State Supreme Court and are able to reverse partisan and racial gerrymandering once and for all. But we've got to hold a Supreme Court seat this year in order to do it.
And what's that plan, Anderson? I know you've been working on this from the very first time, but we talked, I think this was in your mind about the Supreme Court. Walk us through what would be required for you to do to take the Supreme Court back.
So we did one step. Step one was completed last year in North Carolina with Justice Riggs winning a seat. And thank you. I cannot express enough to this community because you all believed in us when truthfully, I don't think the nation even did. And Simon did specifically, and just making sure that he was going to take a risk on somebody young and in politics who had a vision about how we could shape a state. And what that looked like was us keeping a Supreme Court seat by 734 votes last year out of 5.5 million cast in the state, with a candidate that had never run statewide before in North Carolina and did not have that name recognition that we needed even when Trump won in the state. So we did step one. Step two, though, because we are right now currently at a 5-2 minority on a 7-justice Supreme Court in North Carolina. 24 was a hold for us, and 26 is also a hold for North Carolina too, unfortunately. And I know that is a longer term plan than a lot of people want to realize, but 2028, we have 3 Republican seats on the North Carolina State Supreme Court, and we have the ability in 29 to come in and do what Republicans did to us in 2023 and reverse partisan and racial gerrymandering, and in 2030 be able to send back 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans to Congress on our behalf, and to make sure that when reapportionment happens, because North Carolina is the 3rd fastest growing state in the country right now, we've got the ability to have a seat at the table for redistricting so that we make sure we get that 8th seat for a Democrat too.
Yeah, and I can't stress enough that, in the work that we did last cycle, everybody, 2 of the states that were our biggest investments were Wisconsin and North Carolina, in part because they remain some of the most outrageously gerrymandered states in the country. I mean, there are academics who've looked at these states and said these are no longer things that you can call democracies, given how unrepresented they've been in a state. Both of them are, very purple states, and yet the Republic, they had in Wisconsin, they also had this extraordinary, majority in the state legislature that prevented Democrats from doing anything. We made significant gains. Our community put several $100,000 into the state legislative races in Wisconsin in 2024. In part because when I looked around the country, these were the 2 states that needed the most help at the state legislative level, where the gerrymander was just so outrageous, illegal, unconscionable, right, immoral in many ways, so unrepresentative of what a democracy should be. We made huge investments in both of these states, and we made, we unraveled the supermajority in the Senate, right, in 2020.
House.
In the House in 2024.
Mm-hmm.
And in Wisconsin, we picked up a lot of seats where there's now a chance they could actually take back control in the state legislature in Wisconsin. That's after having passed fair maps, which is the kind of thing you're talking about that you would be able to do eventually. So we went through this process in Wisconsin where we elected 2 Supreme Court justices. We invested in the state legislature. We now are making it competitive under fair maps where we can unravel that outrageous gerrymander. It's going to take a little bit longer in North Carolina, but we need to be there, folks. Part of what we do at Hopium, right, is we make these strategic investments that take power away from the extremists. This state, we've invested more in North Carolina than any other state in the country so far since we've been in business. And I hope
Hopium was our largest grassroots funder last year of the state party in North Carolina. You all helped us raise $1 million, and what we were able to do was give $500,000 to my state House caucus, where we had Representative Lindsey Prather and Representative Dante Pittman, Representative Brian Kahn win their seats in places that were R+3 districts. And we were also able to give $500,000 to my state Senate caucus last year, thanks to that too. And so it was the first time the party was able to fully fund our caucuses in a way that we thought was helpful to the cause, and a way for us to give that money so strategically. So to shout you out even more, Simon, my largest grassroots funder in that sense. Let's talk about it like that too.
Yeah, no, and listen, in part, Anderson, because, I just, having looked at a lot of the data, we tried to figure out places where our money and time could make the biggest difference. We don't endorse in a million races. We're not the party, right? We don't have to take care of everybody. We can be strategic. And I'm really proud. The success that we had with you last cycle has inspired us now to invest, because we're going to be continuing. We still are raising money for you. We're still in there. We're raising money for Roy Cooper. But we've taken that model. We've now set up something we call the Audacious Expansion Fund, where we're pouring money into the Maine party, the Iowa party, the Alaska party, the Florida and Texas parties. We've already raised $175,000 for this fund just in a few weeks. This money is really going to matter in this ballot initiative in Maine, for example, that's going to be voted on election day soon. It's hard to believe it's in a few days, right? And so that success we had in this kind of strategic investing in opportunities for expansion and growth that we had with you, that we had with Wisconsin, that we had in Nebraska last cycle, we're now expanding that to these 5 states this cycle, and that will also carry us into 2028. And I'm really proud that people in our community have stepped up and not invested the way that we often do, which is you get an email, you hit click through, and it's a sort of an impulsive gift. We're doing this in a deeply strategic way, right? And you were generous to come back every few months and give us an update so people could understand what their money was being spent on. I think that made a huge difference, Anderson, frankly, for people, because you made it concrete that this wasn't just Simon saying this. This is like the state party chair saying, let me tell you what I'm doing with all that money. And we had real wins with you. And I'm just really proud of you. And I guess that gets to my last question, if you don't mind, is that you're in your second term now. I mean, when you got elected, you were 25, you were kind of young upstart, right? Mm-hmm. Now you're kind of a wizened veteran and national leader of the party. You're recognized all across the country now. Are you having fun? Like, is this, how is it different than in the beginning? It's a very different cycle now. You're going to be running with Roy Cooper at the top of the ticket. Just talk to us about what your life is like, and how are you spending your time? How many days are you traveling? How's Anderson these days?
She's everywhere. I think we're traveling more now than we have been the last 2 years, which I think is even my schedule is insane. And I credit a lot to, we have a lot of people across the country who are interested in helping North Carolina. And I'm trying to make the case to people about the long game in the South, because what I talk about with the Supreme Court, I know a lot of folks right now look at me and they say, Anderson, we may not make it to 28. Like, why are you talking about that election cycle? And to me, it's, the nation is finally having to experience what the South has been going through for 40 years and 40 years before that. Like, we have been in an era of Jim Crow South still, where you have people that are trying to target Black and brown communities. We've seen it with redistricting. We see it now. And I'm like, the nation is finally experiencing, I feel like, what our region has for so long. And that's why I think the South is reacting a lot differently than the rest of the country is in some ways to what this authoritarianism has looked like for us. And I just have to say to all of you out there, welcome to the fight. And I promise you that we will make it. And you decide in 26 and in 28 whether or not we do. And I hope that you lean into that in every way, shape, and form, and know that the short-term victories of Republicans right now in places like North Carolina and Texas are going to go against the long-term detriment for them, in my opinion, because you have people like Simon who are planning that investment in states like Texas and Florida right now. And you have people like me on the ground in North Carolina and people, I mean, like my elected officials, all of the folks around my community, my state legislators who are thinking about how do we move the needle in this state to give back national power. And that means North Carolina's got 2 U.S. Senate seats in 26 and 28. We're the only red to blue flips then. And also looking at the fact that in 28, when we win those 3 Supreme Court seats, we can take back and flip and give 5 more House of Representatives seats back to the Democratic Party nationally. I think our party's got to look long term. And that's what my life looks like right now, is that I am immensely focused on that plan and trying to articulate it and tell it to everybody that I can, because I think so many people look at our party and feel hopeless about the direction and about the way that it's going. And I'm like, you don't have to feel that way though. You can choose to be a part of what we're doing and how we're trying to build something that fights back against what we're seeing right now. And I don't know, the other thing I'll say, when I came into this, it was, I spent a lot of time the last 2 years trying to prove myself. And to your point, I came into this when I was 25 and everybody looked at me like, you're never going to be able to raise money. You're never going to be able to do some of these things that you think you want to do and that you can do. And North Carolina managed to keep on. We're the 3rd largest state party in the country right now. We have 25 full-time staffers. 7 of those are an organizing team that is year-round in our communities. And I think it's amazing. And I'm so grateful to every single one of you and to Simon and to the staff that I have that have made that possible for me, because it has been the best experience.
Well, I mean, Anderson, you've done an amazing job, and and I think that part of what you did and what we did together is we showed to a lot of people last cycle that investing in state parties is money well spent. I think that there's been sort of a vibe in our family for a long time. We've underinvested, chronically underinvested in state parties. I just saw a presentation by Paul Rivera of the DNC, just a preliminary presentation of the final presentation they're going to release in November. Between the party committees and the super PACs last cycle, Democrats spent $10 billion. $10 billion. And we don't have enough money to pay state party chairs in many states a full-time salary. And even Jane Klebb doesn't get a full-time salary in Nebraska, right? Who's the president of the ASDC. I think only 11 state chairs in the country are full-time and paid. How in the world can we expect the Democratic Party to be performing at the highest level possible in a time of national crisis unless we create fully, at least the de minimis levels of funding required to be able to build a real party. And it is, when you look at just the way our money is allocated and how much of it goes to paid advertising that is wasted into reaching into states and districts that no one's, that are outside the target voters, or go down the long list of kind of things that are a little wasteful. We have to be able to take some of those resources and create a floor underneath the party infrastructure. That's part of the reason Ken Martin is, making these unprecedented investments in the states that he is now. It's still insufficient. We need much more. And I think you've created a model where people can look at your state and say, look at what we can do with a real party, right? That has a real leader, has ambition, has the resources required. You guys had arguably the most successful battleground state down ballot of any of the 7 battleground states last cycle, because we had a great chair and you had enough resources to make a difference. And so I think what you're part of, and part of the reason I realize now that you and I almost have to do a promotional video for investing in state parties, is that, or maybe this will be it, is that, you've created a model for the whole country, Anderson. And I think that's really critical. And it also allows other party chairs to say, look, this is what Anderson's doing there. If you fund me and give me the resource I need, look what we can do back home. And so I've been very proud. Look, we've been very proud of the candidates we've supported, right? And of the money. But in many ways, I think the most strategic and important work that we've done at Hopium since we began has been this effort to sort of create to shift adequate resources in a time of national crisis to the state parties, because that money is magnified. It's not just to a single candidate. It benefits everybody, and helps. And also, and this is part of, if I can just say one more thing about this, the fact that you guys are communicating aggressively every single day is something that very few state parties can do. And in a time when we're in this unprecedented information war with the right, where they have so much information superiority over us, having parties that can communicate 24/7, 365 in an intelligent, thoughtful, modern way is a necessity. It's not a nice to have, it's a must to have. And that's the other thing I've been super impressed with your comms team in the work that you're doing, because I think it's deeply relevant to where the debate is right now. And so hats off to you and your team for doing that part of your job and that part of the mission really successfully, I think.
No, I was to say, Simon, you give me way too much credit in the sense of I have the smartest and best people around me constantly. And I am so lucky that they took the salaries that I give them and are working at a state party, because I'm like, man, they could be doing anything else with their lives right now, in my opinion. Thinking about my cat Lawson, who's my voter protection director, or Lillian, or Sarah, and Nye, and just Amanda, all these people, Dawson and Mallory. Oh my God, I'm not trying not to name all of them, because I'm like, oh God, they're
It's
gonna be
okay.
bad.
It's
But
okay.
I've got 25 of them who are literally the best people and also just care so much about the state. And I think that, to your point, when you have a strong state party who can cultivate people that are from the state, that care about it, that also have the political talent to make it work, you know, that is always worth investing in, is homegrown talent in communities right now. And that's what North Carolina gets to be really, really proud of. And the last thing, though, that I'll say on just the redistricting efforts, right, that we have going on, there's a call that we're doing tonight. We have about 1,000 people that are already signed up for it. It's a volunteer call just to come get more information about redistricting and the fight ahead. And it's also going to have Kat Lawson, our voter protection director, on it, who's going to walk through the lawsuits that we're going through right now as well, and just what that'll look like. So if any of you all are able to join us, you can go to ncdp.org and sign up for it. But we're going to have Congressman G.K. Butterfield and other folks on there too with us, who are just going to try to talk through the long-term plan like we did just now on this call, because I think that it's important for folks to know that Don Davis ain't giving up. We're going to fight for this congressional seat. Like North Carolina, he won an R+3 one last year. It's an R+11 now, and we're still keeping on as best we can.
Okay, my friend, thank you for all your time today. Thank you for your continued spirited leadership. It's always, I love hanging out with you. I'm just so proud of what all of you have been able to build together. You have become a model for the nation. I'm just grateful for it.
Thanks, Simon Rosenberg. Thank you for helping us do it. And Hopium, thank you all for helping us do it too. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Anderson. And listen, if you like this video, please, like it, right? Share it with others. Subscribe to Hopium Chronicles on YouTube or on Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, or here on Substack as well. And also make sure that if you loved Anderson, and how can you not, right? Subscribe and give and donate to the North Carolina Democratic Party. Become part of this critical effort. It's the best investment we made since we began Hopium. And I'm sure that you will feel that it's worth your investment. The money and time that you put in be worth every dime. Thanks, everybody. Keep fighting.